Hello everybody. Dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen, I warmly welcome you to the first of a series of talks that we run here in the Pre-Think Forum. My name is Gerd Scholl, I'm a consultant for sustainable business, and I'm very happy to facilitate today's first lunch talk here, entitled New from Old, Closing Loops with Plastics Recycling. As most of you know, the worldwide production of plastic has grown exponentially during the last decades. It was 1.5 million tons in 1950, and back in 2018 it was 360 million tons of plastic produced worldwide, so a factor of 200 within a few decades. What happens with all the plastic after use? Energy recovery is the most used way to dispose of plastic waste. It accounts for more than 40%. Recycling is 1/3 in the European Union, and 25% are landfilled. It is estimated that 95% of the value of plastic packaging material is lost due to the economy after a short first-use cycle. So the question we would like to address today is, how can we regain this lost value? And I'm very pleased that Dr. Thomas Eck has made himself available today to provide answers to this question. Thomas Eck is Chief Technical Officer with PreZero Polymers, and he started this position quite recently, beginning of May, am I right? So, before that he has been Senior Vice President Operations with Untitled Flexibles, a Vienna-based packaging producer. So Thomas Eck is familiar with both sides, the packaging production as well as packaging recycling. He has a background in chemistry, engineering, business administration, you name it, so quite a variety. Mr. Eck, how does plastic recycling work at PreZero? You brought us a few slides and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Scholl. Warm welcome from my side. As Mr. Scholl mentioned, my former employer was Constantia Flexibles, where I spent 26 years in producing packaging, and now I have the honor to treat the waste I produced for the last 26 years. I'm a chemical engineer, so this is a really interesting topic for me. I also worked in the packaging industry, and additionally I was 6 years in the supervisory board of ARA AG, which is the Austrian packaging company, collecting company. So I think I have a little bit of knowledge in that area, and I'm very happy now to work with PreZero, and I want to briefly introduce PreZero to you, because before the headhunter called, I did not know what PreZero was. And PreZero actually belongs to the Schwarz Group, and the Schwarz Group, you might know Lidl, Kaufland, and PreZero is one of their subdivisions. Lidl, Kaufland, you know, 133 billion of turnover, a lot of shops throughout Europe and the world, more than 550,000 employees in 32 countries. And what is PreZero? What is PreZero actually doing? Let me start with what PreZero is making differently to other companies in that industry. If you look at that loop, PreZero really closes the loop, starting with collecting of waste. They run a dual system in Germany. They have collection sorting plants worldwide, and they run recycling plants with a total production capacity of more than 200,000 tons per year. And very recently they also entered the flexible packaging business, and then with this production step they are actually closing the whole loop in waste production. So PreZero Polymers is one business unit of PreZero. PreZero basically is PreZero Dual, PreZero Sorting and PreZero Polymers. And PreZero Polymers, this business unit, consists of 5 plants in Europe, 3 plants in the US, more than 400 employees, with a capacity of 200 kilotons per year, basically focusing on post-consumer waste, LDP, HDP, polystyrene, and as I mentioned before, a capacity of producing flexible packaging of more than 25,000 tons. Let me shortly introduce you to the plants, the recycling plants. The biggest plant is Hamburg in Austria. I was mixing it up with Hamburg when I started here, but it is Hamburg is in Carinthius in south of Austria, and it is one plant of the former Sky Plastic Group. And the second plant that in the past belonged to the Sky Plastic Group is in Fonte. It's in Italy with an annual capacity of 40,000 tons. And Grünstadt, which is the third recycling plant here, it is a joint venture with a capacity of also 55,000 tons. All those plants are dedicated plants. That means they have a clear focus when it comes to the recycled materials. And then let's move over to the US. 2 plants, one in California and one in South Carolina, both with a capacity of 40,000 kilotons per year. What is the production process looking like? It starts, of course, from collecting the input material. As I mentioned before, basically it's LDP, it's HDP, it's polystyrene, and the input material is coming from the sorting plant, is sorting into these material fractions, and then enters the first production step at the PreZero recycling plant, which is the shredding or the graining. So the material actually is cut into small pieces. After this, it is transferred to the washing line, and washing might look simple, but it is a really difficult process. We wash the material, but we sort the material, which is the most important production step here. So we remove the impure materials from the target materials. We call this material stream the reject, and the reject is also then used in other production processes, but we are continuing with the pure product. We dry the product at the end, and then the dry product enters the extrusion lines. And the extrusion lines, they have a very important function. Of course, they melt the particles. We have another filter systems. We degaze the material, and at the end we make small granulates. So the final product is a granulate out of a single polymer stream. What are the products we offer? They are all named somehow after the original group Sky Plastic, so they all start with Sky, and they are named after the different polymers. So we have polypropylene, polypropylene filled products, polystyrene, and HDP and LDP kind of granulates. The granulates then move in the next production step. We do this not by ourselves, so we sell our granulates to customers, And those customers, they extrude, they do injection molding, or they do blow mold. And at the end, it results into products like you see here. Products for building and construction, products for industrial, for gardening, for household, also for children, toys. And the last step I was mentioning already before is we go into flexible packaging as well. So that was the overview of our production chain, and this is our slogan for our customer success. We give global plastic waste a new life to make the world a better place. So please join our journey.
Thank you, Mr. Eck. Please move to the next slide. So thank you very much for providing this brief overview of the plastic recycling process at PreZero Polymers. What is different? What does PreZero Polymers do differently as compared to your competitors or to other recycling companies in that field?
Well, the main difference, as I was mentioning before, is that we really close the complete loop. Yeah? So we run a dual system in Germany, so we collect the material, then we run several sorting plants in Europe, so we sort the materials. We have one of our most modern sorting plants, which can be seen, by the way, tomorrow. And then we run recycling plants, and at the end we run packaging plants. So we really close the full loop in our value chain.
And what do you think, what makes your customers move from virgin plastic to recycling plastic? I guess you have an idea. Unfortunately, there's no customer available today, but you have many of them, and what do you think? What is their motivation behind moving to recycling plastic?
I think one obvious motivation that you pay less for recycled material than for virgin material. This can be one argument, you hear it very often, but it's also about awareness, about green thinking, and at the end about legislation. If you look at the many regulatives coming from national states and also from the European community, you'll see that there is a little force to use recycled materials in their further products. And I think together with this green thinking, with a change in mentality, also with a change in the design of packaging, and with legislation, we can achieve our goals here.
And is it difficult for you to meet the specifications that come from your customers or the producers of those children toys and the other products that you showed us? I assume they have a wide range of different specifications. Is it difficult to meet them?
Yes, you're right. They have specifications that are pretty narrow in some cases, and it is difficult. But this is our know-how. This is what we know about when we talk about recycling. And let me tell you, the biggest challenge at all in this industry is that the input material is varying a lot. Yeah? I come from an industry where you use the raw material with a very narrow specification, and you make in quality income control, and if it's not within the specification, you just reject the product. And this cannot, or is not the case in our industry. First, you cannot really check the input material because you get bales, yeah, more or less. You can look at the bales from the outside, but you will never know what is inside the bale. So you cannot do a quality income check, but at the end, the final product should meet the specification. And the specifications that are most difficult to achieve is basically the color, it's basically the smell, the odor. There are special techniques in order to evaporate odors called refreshers. The technical specifications like melt flow index is also challenge. And finally, when it comes to food grade, we are in a different area from topic-wise, because if you really work on post-consumer waste as your input material, food contact is still a topic, is still a challenge when it comes to migration.
Talking about the qualities of the input that you receive, I wonder how reliable are your supplies? Is there enough plastic waste collected to produce sufficient amounts of customized plastic products?
What I have observed is that the quality of our input material is highly depending on the quality of the sorting plant. So there are sorting plants that, like Eitingen, which are really powerful. So you get a good and more or less stable input material. But there are other sorting plants, and I know the two sorting plants in Austria, and I can say they are not the latest technology. Then you have higher variations of your input material. So this is for sure a key. And when it comes to the amount of input material, quantities, also this is sometimes a challenge, because we sometimes run through cycles where we have more or where we have less input material. And to my personal opinion, I would say we could have much more, we could work on much more input material than we get today.
So I assume most of your input material comes from the sorting plants of PreZero, but you have to buy more than that, probably.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We buy also from ARA, we buy from Templa in Italy, but also from our own sorting plants.
Yeah. And another aspect that is quite often mentioned in case of aluminum recycling is that it saves big amounts of CO2 emissions as compared to the virgin alternative. Do you have any figures or any estimates how much carbon is saved through the production of secondary plastic as opposed to the virgin plastic?
When answering such a question, it's always important to define which kind of emissions you mean. We normally look at scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 emissions, which then incorporates all emissions that are involved in the production of our products, for instance, but also in the production of packaging material. And if you take all those emissions into account, there has been a study by the Fraunhofer Institute published recently, and they say that 60% of the CO2 is saved when using recycled plastic materials versus virgin materials.
Wow, that's quite a lot. I didn't
is,
expect that to be that high.
It is.
Yeah. And you also mentioned briefly the price. So your customers buy secondary material because it's cheaper than virgin material. What do you think, given the global and political context and how energy resource prices will develop, will we face a change in this price ratios, or?
The price of the oil or the virgin material has a certain impact on our industry, but you have to keep in mind that the pure manufacturing costs are more or less stable, more or less. The oil price or the price of the virgin material somehow defines our final product price. There are cases where we sell the recycled materials more expensive than virgin material, but it is not the normal case. Normal case is that we sell around 10 to 20% below the virgin material price. So when the virgin material drops, there's also pressure on our sales prices for sure. And the input material is not moving that fast normally, and so you are in certain periods you are in a certain cost gap, but at the end the raw materials also come down when the virgin materials come down. So at the end it should not have a big influence.
So it's not a matter of costs or prices, whether secondary materials will actually proliferate in the market. It's more a question of the regulatory framework. You mentioned that already. And the European Green Deal has formulated quite an ambitious goal to recycle 55% by 2030 of plastic waste. Do you think that such a goal can be easily reached, or what is in front of us?
It cannot be easily reached, but I believe it's reachable, but it will be a tough challenge because also there's a change in definition, because 55% is now calculated from the recycled material, and this doubles the challenge more or less. But the success will highly depend on the collecting and on the design of the future design of the packaging materials.
And what do you think? There's a couple of ideas and proposals for regulatory standards, such as creating quality standards for secondary plastics. Do you think that's a good idea?
That is for sure a good idea, and I think there will be a breakthrough when there will be regulatories that enables recycled material to go into primary packaging applications.
And also mandatory rules for minimum recycled content in certain products. Do you think that's a good road to go?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And last but not least, there's also a discussion about reduced VAT on recycled products. Do you think that's a good approach?
I think all the examples that you mentioned are approaches in the right direction. It is always a matter of is it a sustainable regulation, and can it go through the parliaments of the states?
Yeah. Okay, there's some way ahead of us still, and I wonder whether someone from the audience might have a question or some comment. Doesn't look like. So, okay, I think then, thank you very much, Thomas Eck from PreZero Polymers. It was very interesting to hear about what PreZero does on plastic recycling, and I'm very much looking forward to further discussions on this topic here on the trade fair. Thank you very much for the moment. Thank you, the audience. Thank you for coming over. And be aware, this afternoon we'll have another talk, our afternoon talk. It will be about sorting of waste and collection of waste. In German we will ask ourselves, Mülltrennung sexy machen, geht das überhaupt? So, see you at 4 p.m. here again in the Pre-Think Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you.